Welcome to Zambia Institute of Chartered Accountants, Examination and Answering Techniques. My name is Dr. Management Ca2. I'm going to take you through Financial Management CA 2.5. My presentation layout is as follows. I'm going to introduce the course itself. Then we'll move on to look at the competences and the learning outcomes that you will be expected as a student. Then I'll try to highlight common mistakes that normally exhibited by students through the examination, reports that come out after the examination techniques. Then I'll try to show you some examination answering techniques that you may employ in order to enhance your chances of passing. Financial management. This is a course that is focused on how efficient and effective an institution organization manages its financial resources in a way that will facilitate the achievement of the objective of an organization. Now, it's important for you to know what this objective of an organization are. As you might be aware, organizations, there are those that are focused on profit making and those that are focused on non-profit making. The profit-making organization is the focus of this particular course, and you may wish to know that the primary objective of this profit-making organization is basically to enhance or increase the wealth of the shareholders. In order to achieve the wealth of to increase the wealth of the shareholders, as financial managers, you will be required to make certain decisions, financial management decisions as we call them. And for this particular course, we will focus more on financing decisions, investment decisions, and dividend decisions. And this particular course will be testing you on these decisions that you'll be required to make. And on top of that, we also address the issues of business valuation. So as you might be aware, this course is at application level, and at application level, you will be expected to, you expect questions that have got scenarios and some supporting information that will be more technically complex. But all the answers that you require to provide will be there in the scenario, and as you apply the concepts that you learn through your studies, you find that this particular course is easy and you can pass when you follow what we share. So what are the competences and learning outcomes that you expect in this particular course? Before we look at that, let's try and understand what are competences and what are the learning outcomes. Competences, these are the ability to do something successfully or efficiently. So if there is a certain competence that we are testing on, we want to see your ability to do that particular competence. Learning outcomes are basically statements that describe the knowledge or skills students should acquire by the end of a particular assignment, class, course, or program, and help students understand why that knowledge and those skills will be useful to them. So these learning outcomes that are required in this particular course, you need to know them. So what are these learning outcomes? Let's start first with the competences. The competences, number one, is that you will be required to evaluate financing options for organizations using a range of methods and taking into account a variety of stakeholders' view. So this particular competence, you may wish to know that it accounts for 20% of the, in the exam paper, or the syllabus, or the weighting, what you need to, to know. The next is appraised investments, which accounts for 30%. And I must say this is a bigger, area that you need to know. In this paper, you will not be expected to pass this paper if you do not know how to appraise investments. As you can see, that is 30%. I will show you how these are mapped out. The next is undertake fully appraised business valuation. So you will be required to evaluate businesses. The last one is to appraise working capital requirements, which accounts for 25%. And that's how the competences are distributed across the syllabus. Let's look at the learning outcome. Learning outcome number 1 that you'll be expected as a student to demonstrate or show that you know. Number 1 is to evaluate the role of financing within an organization and factors including risks that affect financing decisions. Learning outcome number 2, calculate and advise the financing requirements of an organization from a range of options. So you can see that number 1 and number 2 is addressing the issue to do with financing decisions. Learning outcome number 3, apply appropriate risk-based investment appraisal techniques to evaluate investments. And learning outcome number 4, evaluate investment choices within the context of a broader set of factors, including risks. So you can see that this is addressing the investment decisions that you'll be required to make. And also learning outcome number 5, prepare business valuations. This will still fall within that decision. Then learning outcome number 6, appraise working capital requirements for organization. Now these learning outcomes is what the paper or the financial management examination paper will focus on. So there is no question that will come which is outside these learning outcome. So before you go to write or sit for financial management, you need to be confident that you can show that you achieve or you are able to do, or show that you are able to do these learning outcomes. Let us look at some of the key verbs that are in the syllabus. As you have seen already, as we were looking at the learning outcomes there are certain verbs that you have seen that we're starting with. For example, evaluate, calculate, apply, evaluate, prepare, appraise. What do these verbs mean? Because it's important for you to know these verbs as you try to interpret the syllabus. So the key verbs in the syllabus: 1, calculate. What does calculate mean? When you are asked a question to calculate, should ascertain by computation or perform a mathematical process. So if the question says calculate, it's not about you start narrating or discussing. It's for you to calculate through a certain process, mathematical process that you have learned in your course. Explain, make it clear. That's what it means. So don't start stating or listing or mentioning. That is not explaining, and you will not get full credit even if you mention the right answer. For as long as you do not explain, you will not be able to get the full credit. And this verb actually is normally, misinterpreted by most of the students. Instead of explaining, they end up listing or mentioning or stating. Compare, it just means examine the similarity or dissimilarity between two or more concepts. So you need to make it clear about the differences between these two concepts that you are looking at or you have been asked. The next, evaluate. Evaluate is systematic determination of subjects' merit, worth, and significance using criteria governed by a set of standards. Now, this is a very common, or it's a common verb across the syllabus. You need to understand what evaluate means. You saw in the learning outcome that mostly it was about evaluate, and you need to know what this means so that you can provide the right answer. Assess is to judge the worth, importance, evaluate or estimate the nature, quality, ability, extent, or significance. So you can see these verbs, and they are common in your syllabus. Illustrate, explain clearly by using comparison of concrete examples. Further, on the key verbs in the syllabus, describe, you give details, recommend, advise appropriate course of action. This is after you have, probably done maybe the calculations or you have evaluated, then you need to recommend. Discuss. Discuss means you argue and debate about the pros and cons of an issue in order to reach a decision. So if somebody says discuss the net present value as a method of investment appraisal, you are supposed to look at the debate. Your argument, it should be
10 hours.
Pros and cons. List is you list several ideas, aspects, events, things. So you can see that list is different from explain. So if you are asked to explain, you are not supposed to be listing. If you are asked to list, you are not supposed to be explaining. State, you just state, make it precise, make a statement, clear that it is exact to the point. The level of details you'll be putting is different from explaining. Determine, ascertain, or establish a fact about something. I hope you are able to grasp the meaning of these verbs, because as you interpret the competences or learning outcomes in your syllabus, you need to understand what these verbs mean. Let us move on and look at the common mistakes that normally exhibited by students. And this information is coming out from the examiner's reports, what the examiners feel are the common mistakes that you commit as you attempt CA 2.5. So if you can avoid these particular mistakes that we are going to look at, then you are going to enhance your chance of passing this particular paper. Let us look at common mistake number 1, which is failure to cover the whole syllabus before attempting the examination. Well, it's quite common that most of you will go to sit for a paper. Meanwhile, you have not read or gone through the whole syllabus material. You want to focus on certain aspects that you feel are going to come in the exam. But you may wish to know that when examiners are setting papers, they are looking at the whole syllabus, because they want to ensure that a student who goes through this training or a person who studies and has passed financial management, they should exhibit all those competences that I shared with you when we started this presentation. So if you have just looked at one aspect, you are not going to manage to pass this particular paper. So the issue is that you should cover the entire syllabus. By the way, exams are derived from the detailed syllabus. That is the part of your course materials that you are given when you start studying. To demonstrate this, let me share with you just a map of how the exams are done. So let's look at the exam syllabus coverage for CA 2.5, so that you see that if you are not covering the entire syllabus, you have a little chance of passing. So let's look at how these competences are reflected in the examination paper. If you see on the first column there, the competence number 1 is evaluate financing options. So you have seen questions probably on work, sources of finances and things like that. And you know that this contributes, the weighting, it's 20%, which is roughly, when you look at the paper is 100 marks, it's about 20 marks. Now, these questions, if you get the examination papers, you are going to see this kind of distribution, because the paper is divided into section A and section B. Section A is compulsory and B has got optional questions. Section A is 40 marks and B is 60 marks, divided into 20 mark questions. For evaluating the financing option, the chances that this question is going to come in section A is quite high. It's very high. And this question also can come also in section B. So if you are not, you didn't start this particular area, forget about passing. When we go to the next one, appraise investment, you can see this accounts for 30% of the marks or the examination paper, which translates to about 30 marks. And this particular question, the chances that it will come into section A is quite high, and the chances of it coming in section B is low. This information I'm giving you, when you check the question paper, the past papers, you see that this is what it is about. So if you are going in an examination room sitting for CA 2.5 and you are not comfortable with appraising investments, you are not going to make it. And this particular question comes as compulsory. If it accounts for 30 marks and the compulsory question is 40 marks, it tells you that this section A is about appraising investments. Then the other 10% will come from anywhere in the syllabus, and most likely it will come from evaluating financing option, which is the competence number 1. So competence number 1 and number 2, they will form section A. That you need to take note. So as you are studying, ensure that you are comfortable with this area, and when you are comfortable, you can sit for financial management CA 2.5. The next competence is appraise business valuation. This is 25, and it's 25%, and it only accounts for 25 marks. The chances of it coming under section A are quite low, but you will find this question in section B. For competence number 4, appraise working capital, it's again 25 marks. The chances of it coming under section A are quite low, but the chances of it coming under section B is quite high. So you can see that's the distribution. So if you are a kind of a person who is just focusing on competence number 2, you are not going to pass, because you can't pass with the 30 marks. The mark or clearance point is, or the pass mark is 50. So if you just go and focus on one area, you can't pass. And again, if you focus on competence number 1 and 2, that will only account for 50 marks. What are the chances that you get everything? The chances are minimal. That's why you need to cover the entire syllabus as you are studying. Don't specialize. That's the message. Let's focus on investment appraisal, because you have seen that mostly the compulsory question is on investment appraisal. So with this time that we have, or this time I'm going to share with you, let me focus on the investment appraisal and show you further the common mistakes that are coming out from this area, so that probably when you get comfortable in this area, you can enhance your chances of passing. So with investment appraisal, there are certain aspects. There are 4 aspects that you need to know, more especially when it comes to net present value as an investment appraisal techniques. As you might be aware, this is a method that is superior to any other method under investment appraisal. And the examiners, they like this method. If not, all the papers that you have, you can see the past papers, they all focus on net present value. You are not going to do this particular paper or sit for an examination paper in CA 2.5 without NPV being there as a compulsory question. So that is the reason we try to address it here. So the net NPV, the first aspect that I can share with you is to do with the variables. You need to know the variables that are considered in NPV. One thing that you need to know is to know how to determine the discount factor. Normally, the discount factor in an NPV question is your cost of capital, and your cost of capital is falling under the financing options. And this cost of capital, you need to know how it is calculated. How do you estimate it? The next thing is identify the relevant cash flows. It's important because these cash flows are the ones that you are going to discount using the discount factor there. And you also need to know about their timing of these cash flows. Are they coming in year 1? Are they coming in year 2? When are they there? Then you also need to know, are these cash flows that I'm dealing with, are they annuities? Because this is also one of the areas that presents a challenge with the students. So once you identify the variables involved in an NPV question, then everything will be easy. I will show you in a short while the format that you may follow. The next aspect is to do with the calculations now, where you'll be looking at how do you inflate these cash flows. If there is any information about inflation, how do you tax these? Is there any information about taxation, capital allowances, corporate tax? you need to know that. Are there any fixed costs? These fixed costs that we are looking at, are they incremental fixed costs, or they are just allocated? So you need to differentiate between the two so that you know which one is a relevant cash flow. Because we know that fixed costs, incremental fixed costs are what is relevant, because they are varying with your decision that you are making. And if you look at relevant identification of relevant cash flows are cash flows that vary with the decisions that you are about to make. So if a cash flow is not varying with the decision that you are making, then it is irrelevant. Working capital, you also need to know about working capital. And again, working capital in a question can be working capital which is initial, where you just initially invest in a project, and you expect that this working capital will be realized at the end of the project period. Or there will be a continuous investment in this working capital. In that case, it will be increasing. So in a case where it is increasing, what will be your relevant cash flow is during the period of the project, the incremental working capital is what will be relevant in the evaluation, as well as the initial investment. So you need to be comfortable here. Then the other aspect now is to make a decision. What's the decision rule? Should you accept the investment, or should you reject it? You only accept if it's positive. You reject if it's negative. Now, this again is the area where most of the students miss it out. Don't do a calculation or evaluate an investment without making a decision. It's important for you to make a decision, and that decision you should explain it. Why are you accepting the investment? You should state it. I'm accepting this investment because it is giving me an NPV which is positive, which means that the wealth of the shareholders will be increased by this amount. Don't leave it hanging, because just that statement or that decision you are making attracts marks, and some students, they miss easy marks like that, where they just calculate, show a positive figure, and leave it like that. There is no marker that is going to give you credit where you have written nothing. And avoid putting words like positive accept. You are accepting what? Why are you accepting? So there you need to state it or explain it that I'm accepting because this project gives me NPV which is positive, which means that the wealth of the shareholders is going to be increased. If it's the other way around, you'll be saying you are rejecting because the wealth of the shareholders will be decreased if we go ahead with this investment by this amount. It's important to do that. The other issue is to do with you need to know the advantages and disadvantages of NPV, as well as any other investment appraisal technique, because certain questions will come and ask you to explain the advantages and disadvantages. You need to be comfortable with that, not just calculations alone, because there are discursive parts to the questions even on this one. Let us move on and look at failure, the common mistake number 2, failure to identify relevant cash flows to include in the financial evaluation and timing of cash flows. Well, as I was, looking at the first, part of the first common mistakes, I think we have tried to touch on this aspect. it's important for you to know how to identify these cash flows, because they are the ones you are going to discount in an NPV question. Let me move on to show you the format and why we are saying you need to identify the relevant cash flows. And the common relevant cash flows are in this table that is right there on your screen. You need to identify the revenue. You need to identify any variable costs that are there. You need to identify fixed costs, and these fixed costs, like have area indicated, they need to be incremental fixed costs. Once you identify these, then you can find what we're calling the taxable cash flows. These are cash flows that will be subjected to taxation. So for instance, if the tax is at 20%, corporate tax that is, you tax these cash flows. Then the next aspect is investment cost. This is the initial cost of the investment of the project that you are looking at. The other is scrap value or residue value, or this value that you will get from the investment in the fixed assets as part of the initial costs of investment. If there are any assets that you are going to sell at the end of the day after the project ends, that becomes a relevant cash flow as well. Working capital is also a relevant cash flow because you need to invest in the working capital. So normally on working capital, you find that the question will either tell you that this working capital will be realized at the end of the project. It means there will be a cash inflow at the end of the project. In the beginning, you are investing, so it's cash outflow. At the end, you are realizing that investment, it will be cash inflow. Now, there are sometimes the questions are silent. If the question is silent, you may assume, state your assumption to say the working capital will be realized at the end of the project. Therefore, you put that figure there. The next is to do with the tax benefits, tax relief on capital allowances. You may bring in that aspect also. If it's there in the question, it's a relevant cash flow. So all these aspects are common variables, or they are common cash flows that you expect to find in an NPV question. So if you understand this, all you do now is when you go into the question, read the question and just pick these variables from the question. They will be provided there. So when you net them now, you find your net cash flows, which you will discount at the cost of capital. Now this cost of capital, sometimes you'll be required to calculate it. So you need to know how to calculate the cost of capital. So when you discount the cash flows, the next thing is you sum the present values, and what you find is a net present value, and you make a decision based on the outcome. It's important to make the decision based on the outcome. You get credit for that. Let's move on to common mistake number 3, lack of understanding basic annuities. There is a problem with annuities among students. And one thing you need to know is that examiners are interested in these common mistakes, and you see that they will keep on repeating these questions so that it sends a message that you need to understand these areas. It's not areas to avoid. As you can see, there are sittings. I've tried to share with you some of the sitting that where questions came based on the annuities. You can see March 2022, September, and March 2023, there were annuities that were tested. Questions came on annuities, and most, again, as it is always the case, students find challenges. So let's look at March 2023 session where the annuities were tested. So the question was question 1, and what was given were accounting profits with different timing, and these accounting profits needed to be converted into cash flows, and the cost of capital needed to be computed. When you compute it, it was given 16%. So let's look at how these accounting profits were converted to cash flows. There was the issue of adding back the non-cash flow items, which was depreciation in this case, and these were converted to cash flows. And there was a need of now discounting these cash flows. There were annuities in different times. There was the first year, then there were those annuities from year 2 to year 5, and also year 6 to year 10. Annuities, basically, this is a constant cash flow that occurs over a specified period of time. So as you can see, from year 2 to year 5, the cash flow was 3,280, which was constant for this period. Therefore, that becomes an annuity. From year 6 to year 10, it was 3,580. Again, that one becomes an annuity because it's over a specified period of time. Now, they needed to be discounted using annuity factors. Now, how do we calculate these annuity factors, considering that the timing are different? And that's what the question was, trying to test students on their abilities to use annuities. Not for you to start listing for a period of 10 years doing present values. You waste time and just shows that you do not understand the concept of annuities. So let's try and look at how you may calculate these annuities, just as an example. Well, the first thing you do is you look at the last period for that particular annuity, considering that the cash flows were not starting from year 1, they were starting from year 2. So all you are looking at is the annuity from year 2 to year 5. So what you need to do is to remove year 1, and that is how you find the annuity factor for year 2 to year 5. Similarly, you use the same for the annuity for 6 years to year 10. Again, you remove year 5 because you are looking at 6 to 10. Now, these annuity factors, you will find them under the annuity tables. Each examination paper that is given to you as these tables, the present value tables and annuity tables. And this is where you get the information from. Let's move on and look at common mistake number 4. Failure to compute the cost of capital to use in discounting the cash flows. The example I'm just giving you required that you estimate the cost of capital, which was giving us 16%. Now, the question on cost of capital is always there in the exam. It will either form part of the investment appraisal question, or it can be asked independently. Now, where there is a problem is that sometimes students, they fail to differentiate the cost of redeemable debt and redeemable debt, where you are trying to calculate the cost of debt. As you might be aware, the cost of capital is basically the weighted average cost of capital, which comprises all the financing of the business. So you find that the financing of the business is done in two ways. One, you may use equity, which is basically issuing shares, or you may use debt, which you use this debt instrument to raise the finances to fund the business or the project, whatever investment that you are making. Now, the cost of capital basically just reflects the cost of those finances, which is basically the minimum expected return by the investors, the owners of that money. What is the minimum expected rate of return? That is your cost of capital. To the business, it's a cost. To the investor who is investing, it's a return. So now, how do you compute or how do you estimate the cost of these finances? So for debt, you will, for instance, if you are looking at the cost of redeemable debt, you will use the internal rate of return to do your estimation of the cost of debt. And for a redeemable debt, basically you just be looking at your interest rate that you are receiving, which is your interest rate after tax. Then you divide it by the market value of debt, and you get your cost of debt. It's as simple as that. In the case of the cost of equity, you are required to use two methods: dividend valuation model or capital asset pricing model. Now, with the capital asset pricing model, it has been seen or observed that students have got a problem in differentiating between asset beta and equity beta, more especially where you are required to do the ungearing and regearing. And this has been a problem or a nightmare for students. But what you need to do is just to go back to the books and read, and you understand that asset beta, you are basically looking at this beta which do not reflect debt. There's no gearing in the financing structure. You are just basically looking at these businesses. If you look at equity, you would have debt in the capital structure. So when you are doing those regearing and regearing, you understand it from that perspective. So it's important that you revise on these particular concepts. There was a question that came in investment appraisal, CA 2.5, in March 2021, which was basically testing on it was on net present value, but it has a component of the cost of capital, where there were issues to do with the regearing and gearing. So this is one of the papers you may use in your revision to try and understand how you can go about regearing and gearing. So you find that what was given in the question was the asset beta, which required to be regeared. So this was the question. You can see that the first part was asking about calculating the weighted average cost of capital and the specific project cost of capital. The other is to do with the NPV, which we have already shared. So all you needed to do as a student was to find the current weighted cost of capital, which was the first aspect. So all you needed to do was regear that asset beta, so that you come up with the equity beta of 1.2, and you find your cost of capital because there was debt in that capital structure. So this is how you needed to go about. I'm sure in your own time you can find time and go through this, revise using this particular paper, which was done in March 2021. The rest, these are just the solutions which you can find in your in the past papers. Let's look at the other common mistake, which is number 6. Failure to compute capital allowances and incremental working capital. Again, this is a problem which in my the area discussions are touched on this to do with the capital allowances, which is basically about taxation. Again, you need to know that there are two methods that are used, either reducing balance or straight line method. So when you go into the question, please identify which method is being used when you have capital allowances there. Don't always assume that it will be reducing balance method. No, sometimes straight line is given, and you need to check it out that this is what you've been given, so that you can make the appropriate computations. I think I shared with you on how you put this in the table of the net present value valuation. Then the issue to do with the relevant cash flow for working capital, like we had addressed earlier, you look at the initial, and if there is any incremental, you look at just the incremental part, and you may assume that at the end of the investment, this working capital will be realized. So it's important to avoid such issues. Once you know this, and when you start looking at the question, all you do is remember things that you are supposed to do, because all the information of what you are supposed to do is given in the question. Number 6 is failure to discuss other non-financial factors impacting on investment decision. Now, these are some of the areas that students neglect. Students are always seen to be doing calculations only, but it's important that you know that there are also discursive questions. So you need to even understand what you are computing. So you need, sometimes question will ask you to discuss certain aspects that are impacting on the investment evaluation that you are doing. So if you don't know those, you don't know what you are doing, you may have a challenge answering this question. So it's important, in as much as you know how to calculate, you should know also the reasons why you are doing those calculations and why you follow a certain process, so that if you are asked a question, you'll be able to answer. And mostly when you're answering questions which are in this nature, to do with the non-financial factor impacting the investment decision you are making, you need to reflect on the scenario, because your answers should relate to the scenario that has been provided. Number 7, failure to read actively and answer a question asked. Mostly students exhibit this tendency of providing answers to the questions that has not been asked. So this is a situation where, like, a student was expecting a certain question, and they just see a question that is similar to what they were expecting, and they start providing answers in line with what they were expecting. Such a situation will not give you credit. You will not earn you credit. You need to read the question and answer the question that has been asked. The reading of these questions actively, I think we have already shared the interpretation of the verbs. You have to watch out for the verbs that you have been given in the question. So you have to interpret those verbs according to the way we have just shared. The other common mistake, which is probably the last common mistake that I'll share with you, is failure to do the simple things. Failure to do the simple things. Mostly, examiners complain that students fail to focus on getting easy and straightforward marks. In any paper that you are going to be, sitting for, there are always easy marks that are there. The exam is not to make you fail. The exam is to assess your understanding all the particular concepts that have been covered in the syllabus. It's not to make you fail. So even when examiners set these questions, there are those questions that are there for you, which are just easy for you just to pick. So there is this tendency of not gaining these easy marks, which are just straightforward. Probably one of the leading factor to this is fail to manage time. You find that because you knew too much on investment appraisal, you spend all your time answering investment appraisal question, which takes you probably 2 hours. Then you remain with 1 hour to address other areas, and you run out of time. And in that manner, you fail to even pick easy marks or straightforward marks that were in section B. Now, if you plan your time and manage your time, you find that you are going to answer all the questions. It's important. I'll show you at the end of this presentation how you can allocate your time so that you avoid this particular mistake. It's important that you know that there are always easy and straightforward marks in any question paper, which you need to identify, and you can only identify these questions when you plan on how you are going to answer your question. There is time that is given, reading time. That's the time that you can take advantage and ensure that you identify questions that you are going to attempt. Let us look at the examination answering techniques that you may employ. Now, these techniques, they have been shared with you over time. You may have gone to check his different websites. You can source different information elsewhere. These examination answering techniques have been shared by different people. And what is important is for you to apply them. They work. And if you avoid them, it's also a common mistake. So the first one is to do with the adequate preparation. Understand the whole syllabus. Avoid mastering questions. This is very important, and this is the first thing that I shared with you about understanding the whole syllabus, because the examiners are interested in the entire syllabus. Avoid mastering questions. And it's important also to arrive on time in the exam. You need to read and follow instructions. It's part of the exam. You enter your correct details. Don't give false information. It's important. It's all about adequate preparation. Time management, I've just shared with you that is part of the common mistakes that students make. Please, please, please manage your time. You may be knowledgeable. You may have adequately prepared yourself. You have studied the entire syllabus. But if you do not manage your time, definitely, you'll be disappointed. It's important. You need to know one thing. that if you allocate your time for each question using the 1.5 mark rule for each question, if you go beyond the allocated time for a certain question and you continue, you should know that that is an opportunity cost. There is an opportunity cost in that. In that you are losing marks, some easy marks elsewhere for continuing answering a question that whose allocated time has expired. Because you may be trying to finish or complete on a 5 mark when you can use that time to gain 10 marks elsewhere. That's an opportunity cost. And that's how students fail the exam, because they did not plan their time wisely. So if you encounter a difficult question and all the allocated time for that particular question has expired, please, please, please leave that question and go to answer questions elsewhere. When you finish maybe the easy questions elsewhere and you remain with a bit of time, you can come back to address that particular difficult question you were answering. The other issue is to do with presentation of work. Plan your answers, especially discursive questions. Learn to separate your points. Don't write or put all your points in one, paragraph or sentences. Separate points, or you can even use headings to show that this, what I'm talking about here is this, what I'm talking about here is that. That enhances your chances of gaining full credit and passing later on. It's important. The other issue is understanding the key verbs, which we have shared. It's important for you to know these key verbs because they will help you answer, provide the right answers to the questions asked. Then I've already discussed on the issues of you picking the easy questions first. That is for you to get the low hanging fruits. Pick the easy questions first. This will allow you to settle down. Because we all know when it's exam time, when you're in the exam room, you are panicking. So if you go for difficult questions, that can defeat you. And you only have 3 hours to answer the questions. So it's better you pick the easy question first, then you answer it. It's not that you should follow the way the question paper is read out. Like question 1 should be the first one, question 2 or 3. It's not like that. You can start with question 5, you come to question 3, then question 1, question 2. It doesn't matter. What is important is for you to label clearly the question that you are addressing. That's all. The investment appraisal CA 2.5 2021 exam will use it to just show how you can allocate your time. So this was a 40 mark question which was a compulsory, and using the 1.8 rule, we will try and see how you can distribute your planning of the time. So you can see you can allocate reading time to the scenario because you need to understand this scenario. So you can probably use the 0.3. And when you multiply 0.3, you multiply by 40 to give you 12 minutes. So that means for the 40 mark question, you allocate 12 minutes to just reading the scenario and planning how you answer the question. Because it's important for you to know the scenario. All those things I was talking about under NPV, identifying the variables, is when you are reading, you should be identifying those things. So that when it comes to attempting, like for instance, part A, in this question that came, you only have 21 minutes to arrange everything in a manner that is required. For part B, 18 minutes. So you are using from 1.8, if you remove 0.3, you remain with 1.5. And that's the one you use now to determine how much time you should allocate in answering each part of the question. You follow this and you will not be disappointed in the next exam sitting that you'll be sitting. Planning is important. In everything, planning is very important. There is a saying that failure to plan is planning to fail. Let's make some conclusion on what we have discussed so far. One important thing you need to know is that the entire syllabus for CA 2.5 is examinable, and therefore you should never specialize in a few topics. Just check the papers, the past papers, and see how that has been practiced. The entire syllabus is examinable, and examiners religiously follow that, because that is a requirement. When studying, you need to be aware of the weights attached to the various competences and learning outcomes, as I highlighted in our introduction to this presentation. Please go back on this one and see the distribution, the mapping of what is expected, section A, section B, so that in your studying you plan accordingly. The objective of the examiner is to include questions relating to investment appraisals, anything to do with the dividend decisions, or capital structure. You find such questions. Valuation, financing, you find those questions will come. So it's important that you do not specialize in any just specific question. So you may wish also to know that whatever we've discussed here, even when you go to higher papers, for instance, public sector financial management or advanced financial management, it's the same. It's the same. You should also take note that important areas of the syllabus where students do not perform well, they are frequently examined. So these common areas that I've just shared with you, you find that when you get the papers, past papers, they are consistently tested. It's not that they are the only things that are there in this. They are consistently tested because those areas students need to study and understand and learn. That's why they are tested. So you will not go into an exam hoping that this particular area of the syllabus does not come. You find that it will always be there. And please avoid poor presentation of work and poor time management. Avoid that. And please answer the right question that has been asked. Don't answer questions that you feel should have been asked. Once you do this, the chances of you passing is quite high. Please, even when you are studying on your own, you should know that you need to start with understanding the syllabus. If you are attending a tuitions elsewhere, it's also good that you understand and ask the tuition or whoever is taking you through, so that you cover the entire syllabus, know all the areas that are required. It's good for you. And thank you. You can go and prepare for the next exams that are coming. I hope for the best.